our panel 4, first panel for today, on Earth observation and the security applications in the GCC. Okay, Jim, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Alex. As I say, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever people are joining in the world. It's a pleasure to be able to moderate and talk to these panelists that have worked across the industry for so long. Today, we're going to have a conversation on how Earth observation is being adopted across the GCC region and sort of what that means for sovereignty and resilience in an ever more sort of changing and conflicted world that we see ourselves in. Over the last few years, we've seen Gulf countries move from sort of EO customers to EO architects, launching satellites around the region, building space agencies, investing in data, AI, local data, AI capabilities, and how that really shifts the drive in region from turning pixels into decisions, and what that means in terms of how can we really strengthen the EO resilience within region without creating new dependencies or vulnerabilities within the system. So why EO now? Across the GCC, EO is no longer sort of a niche specific tool. And it's not just something that's unique to GCC. I should say I've worked across geospatial remote sensing for the last sort of 30 years, which is probably aging me. I just saw the picture they pushed up, and turns out I started this with hair, and now obviously that's evaded me. But the really thing I would say is that across those things, from being the sort of strange person in the corner in silos talking about what this can do, being a partner at Access Partnership and previously at other organizations and working with the adoption of Earth observation, is that you see this area where now it can be used in all decision making, from the highest C-suite strategic thinkers through to operational tactical deployments in other areas, and how we solve problems from conflict and resilience through to sorry, I think we've got someone on chat. Sean, could you go on mute, please? Thank you. And then that combined with what we've seen in industry around sort of the adoption of reuse rockets, making satellite deployments much more readily available at a different cost point, opening up new business models, the data centers and cloud computing, allowing us to process that information at rapid rates to turn the decision life cycle around much quicker. And as I say, and then lastly, the processes of what it can do and the capabilities that being existed. So we've got sort of three themes for this conversation, although I'm sure and hopefully we can wander as the conversation develops. The first one is sovereignty. Who controls that data? How do you gather it? What do you need to be able to control, and what can you not repeat and learn lessons from others? And I think we'll have some differing views on that. What's the subtle difference between sovereignty and resilience? I.e., do you need to own it, or do you just need to have a resilient way of controlling it? And what does that mean in terms of also how AO can be used for resilience in terms of the GCC economies, from drought planning, early flood warning, environmental, as well as other technology gains. And then lastly, how do we speed up, and what is the impact of AI? And then maybe even if we have time at the end, we might even touch on the impact of something like orbital data centers and doing off-world processing, and what that might mean for the industry and how people access it. So I know no one actually, unfortunately, as much as I'd like to think, has joined to listen to me talk to you. So without further ado, I will start introducing the panel. The way the session will work is that everyone will sort of introduce themselves, their company and what they do, and then some views around those three themes for about 5 minutes each, and then we'll go into a full Q&A session. So without further ado, and they don't know what order it's coming in, which I always like to keep people on their toes. So to start with, if we could start with, if I could introduce Massimo Zotti from Plantech, who's head of government affairs. I'm not going to introduce their companies because they'll do a far better job of it than I will. So, Massimo, over to you.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Massimo Zotti, head of the Government and Security Strategic Business Unit at Planetech Italia. Planetech is a part of the wider Deorbit Group ecosystem. Our group operates across the full space value chain, as we call it: Earth observation, AI-driven geospatial intelligence, orbital infrastructure. Jim, you were mentioning data processing in space. So when we say orbital infrastructure, we refer to this capability. I would be happy to elaborate more if we have time at the end of this meeting. We provide onboard processing in space, and since more than 30 years, operational downstream services for government and defense users. We are strongly investing in the GCC region. Planetech already operates through a regional branch in the Gulf. We recently established the Orbit Saudi with the ambition to support the development of local sovereign space capabilities. So our vision is to contribute to the growth of a regional ecosystem through technology transfer, industrial cooperation, local capacity building, and in the longer term, satellite manufacturing and operational know-how within the GCC. Because we believe the region is moving from being a consumer of space services to becoming a global space actor in its own right. Shall I elaborate more on our perspective on what's happening across the GCC, Jim?
Yeah, if you want to give two minutes on it, Massimo, and then we'll
Okay, thank you.
and then we'll start a
Sure.
more sort of open conversation after that. But I think just to sort of set out a position from each company would be a great way to start.
Sure. What we see as one of the most interesting things that's happening across the GCC is notably the transition from using Earth observation data to building sovereign Earth intelligence capability. This is not only about satellites. It's about controlling the full information chain, from acquisition, secure transmission, processing, elaborate AI-based analytics, operational dissemination to government and security users. So what we see across the region is a very strong focus on resilience, autonomy, and rapid decision-making and trusted information flows. That's where we try to operate. I think the GCC is in a unique position today globally because it combines three elements: strategic ambition, strong institutional leadership, and the ability to invest in long-term sovereign infrastructure. So from a government and security perspective, which is my role in Planetech, the opportunity is enormous because Earth observation today is becoming part of the operational backbone for border security, maritime domain awareness, critical infrastructure protection, environmental resilience, disaster response, in general, defense ISR workflows. But the key challenge today is not just accessing the imagery alone, because the real challenge we see as well in Europe is on latency, sovereign, and trust. So first of all, reducing the time from information to decision. And so governments increasingly they want to know where the data comes from, who processes data, where data is stored, who can access this data, and whether the integrity of the information can be guaranteed end to end. So that's why we believe the evolution is a combination of sovereign Earth observation architecture, AI-enabled analytics, and on-orbit processing. We have already, as a group, we have already launched 4 satellites with a pre-operational onboard capability in processing. And the aim of our mission is instead of sending huge amounts of raw data to the ground and processing everything afterwards, we are moving toward a model where the satellites become intelligent nodes in space. So that means detecting events directly on board, filtering relevant information, triggering autonomous tasking between satellites, and at the end, dramatically reducing the time between observation and decision. So from government and defense users in the GCC, this can create a major operational advantage. Happy to elaborate further on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Massimo. Right, so over to our next panelist, if I could introduce Ghayadah Al-Jabri from Ankaa Space as Head of Space. Ghayadah, over to you, please.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me today for this panel. I am Ghayadah Al-Jabri. I am Head of Space Department in Ankaa. Ankaa is based on Muscat in Oman. We are working in several diverse sectors. We are in space using integrated solutions in Earth observation and empowering with AI and also providing capacity building programs to accelerating companies, providing lectures and workshops in space areas. Actually, Ankaa is based with technologies in drones, as well as we are integrating Earth observation using drones and satellite imagery together to providing an integrated solution from end to end. Also using our team in as software developers to providing full-end platforms for end using and decision making for the clients. We are also having a team in GIS and remote sensing for processing data using the data acquisition using satellite imagery and drones. So Ankaa now is, we are proud that we have been run OSAP program, Oman Space Accelerator program. We have been graduated 7 companies last cohort. Most of them, they are working in upstream and downstream areas. We announced both the winners last Middle East Space Conference. Most of them, they are working on Earth observation, upstream, like building and manufacturing rockets. Also, we as Ankaa, we are willing and to improve our capabilities in Earth observation and processing of data using AI models for serving governments, bodies, and provide them solutions in different areas.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'll now hand over to Sean, who is CEO of Up42 and Vice President of Geospatial. I hope I got that right, Sean, for Neo Space Group. Sean.
Thank you, Jim. So yes, as you mentioned, my name is Sean Leeds. I'm here in 2 capacities. One as the CEO of Up42, and a small correction, Jim. I'm the EVP of Global Marketplaces at NSG. NSG Geospatial Services is a separate business, but what I'm responsible for is the sort of global platforms that work with Earth observation, other kinds of geospatial data, which is really the sort of middleware between the upstream data providers and the downstream solutions that are using all of the data. So firstly, just from an Up42 perspective, we were originally created in 2019 as a corporate venture under Airbus Defence and Space, with the goal of making it much easier for people to access commercial imagery, not only satellite imagery, but also aerial and drone imagery, And as we've expanded the platform, we've realized that all of the problems, technical, commercial, contractual problems that people have, and the barriers that are in place that prevent the industry at large from mainstream adoption of commercial satellite imagery and commercial geospatial data, these problems are not only evident for smaller startups and sort of scale-ups, but they're the same kind of challenges that are experienced by every level of company that you can think of, whether it's a large enterprise or whether it's a public authority, and increasingly now, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, also on the defense and intelligence sides when we start talking about sovereignty and resilience. So our platform has grown to today include 80 different providers. 40 of them are data providers, 40 providers of algorithms, etc. We have more than 300 data sets connected to the platform, and our customers can either via the console or via the API access any of those commercial data sources, either through archive data or also just tasking satellites from multiple providers at the same time. And this is a really critical part of resilience, as we'll see in a bit. But one note there is that we've now, as of last year, in the middle of last year, we were purchased by the Neo Space Group, a public investment fund of Saudi Arabia-owned company based in Riyadh. Up42 is based primarily in Berlin, and we were purchased with the main purpose of fulfilling the CST regulatory permit of setting up a national Earth observation platform for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which was awarded to NSG. We have now launched that platform in Saudi Arabia I think it was in March or April last year, where we started rolling that out. And this has been now available for just over a year to the industry at large inside of the kingdom, providing exactly the same platform technology that's available for Up42's international customers in the kingdom. And this was, I think, some remarkable foresight from the CST, and I think Frank Salzgeber from the CST, who's talking on a panel later, was a critical person in getting this over the line. But the whole idea there was recognizing the importance of sovereignty in space and the importance of having access to a sovereign platform, not only for the perspective of securing supply to critical government agencies, etc., but also in helping to stimulate an ecosystem of companies that can use the data for the purposes of creating a richer ecosystem and capacity building inside of the kingdom. So that's what we're there to support with. And I think what's really critical now, coming over to the elements of sovereignty and resilience, for me, sovereignty means that you control access to the asset and nobody can take it away. And also you have secure access to that. Nobody else can see the data that you have, right? And I think that's a very important part of it. And the resilience part of it means that you have multiple redundant assets that you have access to. So in case one goes down or you lose access to one for whatever reason, you always have redundant backup assets or satellites that you can get data from. And this is exactly what our platform is providing. We have a sovereign version of the platform running in the kingdom, staffed fully by Saudi nationals. We have also a lot of different data providers connected up there, and exactly the situation, as we all know, the situation in the GCC region right now has changed dramatically over the last 70 days. And we have had also situations where a lot of the commercial providers have had some restrictions on how data is accessed over the region. And by virtue of the fact we've had this platform in place, with multiple redundant assets available through that platform, it's meant that our customers in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia have had access to data regardless of the restrictions over the region. So this is a really critical part, and I think a strong proof point why a sort of meta operator platform is a critical part of the entire chain of sovereignty and resilience in space. Jim, I think you're on mute still.
Sorry, thank you, Sean. Thank you very much, Sean. And last but no means least, if I could hand over to Venkat, who is the CEO and founder of LC60 AI. Venkat, over to you.
Thanks, Jim, and good day all. Thanks for having me on this conference. LConnect60 is a Western Australian headquartered company. We're based in Perth. 7 years now as a company and over 45 plus people. We're focused on being a satellite Earth observation insights provider, but also we are operating our own Earth observation constellation. Currently got 2 satellites that focus on very high resolution shortwave infrared sensor capability that is moving into orbit 2027. So quite busy on that. As a company, we set out to basically solve the two ends of the Earth observation value chain, delivering novel data sets into or generating novel data sets from orbit by the development of novel sensors. We saw the shortwave infrared spectral range as being underserved, particularly from space. And we saw a lot of opportunity in developing novel capability around that, but also very much on the other end of the value chain, which is the last mile, what I call the last mile of downstream insights. So where we're looking at taking pre-processed or post-processed Earth observation data and converting that into insights that can be actioned by end users in agriculture, in defense, in resources. So as a company, we focused on the three securities that I like to call it: food security, climate security, and defense and security. So with those three verticals, LC60 as a company has derived a number of key AI products, which we have delivered into government, particularly the government of Western Australia, where we've delivered insights to over 13 different departments, gathering data from over 30 different types of satellites today, be it optical, infrared, far, signal intelligence, hyperspectral, GNSSR data. So this is just to give you a breadth of the type of Earth observation data set that we have gathered, agglomerated, homogenized data processing systems for, and delivered insights into various government departments. As a company, we have quite a substantial footprint beyond Australia into Southeast Asia and also into the Gulf. So, for example, in Malaysia, we work with the National Rice and Grain Agency. We power a smart farming app for over 125,000 rice and grain farmers. The farmers don't actually even know that they're getting insights from Earth observation data. That's just how seamless it is. They just get the information that they need on where to water more, water less, put more fertilizer, less fertilizer. So that's the type of use cases we like to get involved in, where actually the Earth observation capability sits in the background, where civil use cases are concerned. But we also have quite a significant Gulf footprint now, where we've set up a wholly owned subsidiary in Abu Dhabi, and we are working with key partners in the UAE on developing next generation technology around our shortwave infrared sensors and platform capability. We are also, we've got a joint venture entity in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, for example, where we were shortlisted on the Saudi Space Up Challenge and looking to deliver more civil applications around agriculture and climate. So that's where we've kind of taken a balanced approach, if I could call it that, of looking at the upstream capability that we can deploy the orbit where there is a key data gap. And then looking at very much that last mile downstream where we can convert a processed data set into insights. We're just trying to address some of the themes that Jim had raised earlier around sovereignty. I think for us, we are not we're moving away from, I suppose, the way traditional EO data is delivered and consumed. I'm trying to move away, for example, from very heavy end user license agreements and restrictive use of data sets. We want to keep the playing field as open as possible to really drive up insights as a service, to really provide satellites as a service. If I can just talk about those two models. So, for example, when we talk about downstream insights and the ability to provide sovereignty or localization, the idea that we have implemented quite successfully is around how do you embed source code, how do you embed knowledge transfer and tech transfer of that last mile downstream into government workflows so that it becomes fully autonomous with what they need to action. The same way on the upstream, when we talk about the satellites and the sensors, there is a localization that can happen in country where there is a full exclusivity around licensing, tech transfer, and know-how development. LC60 then works with the government partner on such that that capability can be fully localized. And we think that the Earth observation sensor capability itself, pairing on-orbit compute with the sensor capability and providing that as a sovereign developed capability is something that LC60 is increasingly involved in, particularly in the Gulf and some of the work that we're presently doing in the UAE. So I'll kind of stop there, but I think from LC60's point of view, we're very keen to engage in this conversation with our fellow panelists today to really unpack the sovereignty piece and the resilience piece from the angle of what we can provide some insights and add value around what's happening upstream and what's happening very downstream in that Earth observation value chain. Thank you.
Thanks, Venkat. I'll just make sure I am off mute this time. So I think what we've heard and seen is the breadth and depth of the different components that go into the Earth observation, and also from Massimo and others why the GCC is so important for the development of the industry and for the region. I think one of the questions I wanted to just follow on, and before we move out of the sovereignty and resilience, and I'm going to try and sort of bundle this with two because I think they're related, is that with recent events where we've seen, for example, the reduction in initially timing, so the time from insight with services from Planet because of national interests elsewhere, through to removal of a service because a company is owned somewhere else, through to the adoption of AI and where those large language models sit and things like Google's GeoAI and other sort of large classification models that are being developed to, I mean, in some ways democratize EO data, but in other ways create other resiliences on hyperscaler LLMs. Sean, starting with you and someone that's sort of uniquely placed being in your sort of two hats as NSG marketplace as well as Up 42 and the wider marketplace, and being sort of German heritage into a GCC country. How does that feel, and what's your views on how that can be mitigated for resilience and sovereignty, but also how we deal with some of those check challenges as well?
Oh, thanks, Jim. Look, I think the first thing I'd say is that we always need to remember that Earth observation data, particularly when you look in the commercial domain, it is a dual-use technology, whether you like it or not. And I know there's a lot of people advocating for more open access to data and make it easier, etc. And I mean, fundamentally, yes, there is a strong reason to do that, but there's also a very strong reason to maintain control over that data and to be responsible with that data. So I know there was backlash initially to some of these commercial Earth observation companies who had restrictions from the government, but it's always been our perspective that these controls are there for a reason, and we need to work with the different national governments to figure out what the right thing to do is. And this is exactly the approach that we've taken, right? So firstly, from a baseline perspective, again, the resilience and the redundancy by having a platform that gives you seamless access to multiple assets and multiple constellations from different jurisdictions, from different countries, means that if one country makes a decision to slow down the access to data, you're not fully blocked out because you've got options, right? And I think that's the first layer of how to deal with this. The second layer is that we have been working with all of the different providers to figure out under which conditions and for which downstream customers we are able to open up access to the data. Because again, in a lot of cases, the customers we have are anyway allied to the nations that are controlling these constellations. And I think then it's really just about making sure that the end-to-end chain of control is in place and that it's done in a trusted and auditable way, so that you know that you're being responsible with the data. And I think this is the sort of key element there. And again, I really want to reiterate, if a company that is reselling commercial imagery does not have the infrastructure to protect the national interests of the satellite operators, then you have no business being a reseller of commercial imagery. I think that's the first thing. Coming to your comments around what is the role of AI and how do we see that playing a role? I mean, from our side, we see it in multiple perspectives, right? I mean, we've had AI algorithms on our platform since day one on sort of individual use cases around extracting value from the imagery, and this is the sort of typical use case that's been around for ages. But we see a much larger role going forward, and it's not only about the foundational models that you mentioned, right? I mean, it's all the way through the stack of how you build it to start with. Then there's the foundational elements, but there's also the elements, the foundational models, but there's also the element of how people start to interact with the data and with the solutions. We have customers that now interact with our platform, mainly through MCP agents and just basically talking to a chatbot to figure out what the status of their tasking is, or is there Vanto or Airbus data over the specific area. And this change of interaction model is also helping to accelerate the usage of Earth observation data, because it makes it that much more accessible for people to get an understanding of whether there's data available immediately to solve their use case, to task satellites and manage the tasking process end to end, but also to extract value from that downstream. But again, a final comment from my side on this. Again, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with it. I mean, of course, there's a lot of automation and value that can come from AI, but we've seen also recently in some things that have gone wrong with targeting systems where a lot of AI has been picking targets, and there have been mistakes that have been made. So although we are very much for automation on the UP42 side, there's also an element where, depending on how consequential the outcome of that algorithm is, there is also a layer of validation that needs to be built in, a layer of security that needs to be built in, and maybe sometimes that means in some cases we still need a human in the loop while we're still building things out.
Thanks, Sean. And sort of Venkat, over to you to sort of from a sort of a downstream aggregation, analytics, insight perspective to someone that's making and deploying sensors, and also the fact that it's from a non-GCC nation. What is your view on the topic?
I know that's a very pertinent one, and I think this is where we, at least in LC60, are trying to blur the lines around what's actually coming from non-GCC versus what's actually being put together in the GCC. I think you could start anywhere from you're buying a sensor from a non-GCC country, and you're figuring out how to integrate that with a satellite platform in the GCC. That's probably the most basic of a tech transfer, but I think that's already being done today. Where we are trying to look at pushing the envelope is around design and development of such sensors happening in a GCC country, where elements of the supply chain could either be assembled or sub-assembled in the GCC. So there is some elements of resilience around the Earth's observation sensor development itself. Granted that assembling an Earth observation sensor in itself is something that requires decades of experience and know-how, and having the right talent as well in country is critical. But I think what we are seeing, at least with the development of our next generation SWIR sensor, is the willingness of experienced providers in conjunction with LC60's team being in a position to be based in the Gulf, being based and setting up the ability to work in clean rooms in the Gulf to assemble these sensors. So I think that's important, and having some form of IP around how that sensor is packaged, the spectral bands that are selected, and why, and know-how around the atmospheric science that goes into the development of sensors are also very important. So it's not just about hardware and manufacturing, it's also the remote sensing science that goes behind the development of the sensor itself that I think requires some form of localization, something that we're actually very actively working on in the Gulf today and changing that paradigm.
Thanks, Venkat. And I'm still going to pick up on something that you said around sovereignty, and it also aligns with one of the questions that Sarah has. So, Ghayadah, from a perspective of local skills training, and the question from Sarah is, what technical skills gaps do you think GCC engineers should focus on now to support the next phase of commercial space growth? I know you've done a lot of training, development, accelerators within Ankaa Space. So, what are your views on that, and how can the budding engineers as well as the skills gap be bridged, if there is a skills gap at all?
Yes, actually, for the capacity building, actually, the highly needed here, what we notice is data processing for the image processing after the acquisition. For computer vision, this is a very massive needed of for engineers who can write AI algorithm that run on the satellite, and also for the hyperspectral analysis, which is required specialized physics-based machine learning to interpret chemical signatures for the certain uses. This is requires high cost for processing the data, actually. And also for the small sat manufacturing, actually, here there is a lot of dependencies of abroad components, which is, and also we were happy to see one of the companies graduate from OSAP. They were inventing a technology for 3D printing for the components of rockets and the parts of rockets. So this is allowing low cost for moving forward in manufacturing small satellites. And also for space business and ecosystem management. This needs highly training and capacity building and strategic sourcing and procurement for as exploring the government procurement engineer must understand how to manage complex international supply chains, and also business assessment as needed technical experts to assist them in the new space technologies. This is, and also in cybersecurity for space to ground link in communication and for digital infrastructure. I see there is a lot of areas that highly need to be focusing, but in the Earth observation, data processing is the most highly needed now. As we see, there is a lot of requests for processing and analytics, especially in the environmental uses. This is moving to an opportunities for us resilience for the sector. It's moving from single satellites to constellation of satellites, and also for the Earth observation marketplace, which is securing the national gateway for acquisition of data. So yes, did I answer the question correctly or?
Perfectly, Ghayadah. Thank you very much. But just could you also just touch on, you've run a few accelerators and incubators, and how you found that from the companies and the individuals that are signing up to those? Have you got any sort of nuggets and takeaways from those?
Yeah, actually, the technology is ready and right there, but the issues was securing the contracts for these companies and maturity of the market about the space services, which is leading, and found that the awareness of the usage of the space data with the space services is there is a lack of awareness. So well, that's why the governments here are the highly invest in the capacity building for awareness and train the even the government's bodies knowing aware of them about the usage of space data. So the very important notes that we, after the impact of the program, is not about the technology itself. It's about the readiness of the market, as well as securing contracts is the difficult part for the businesses here in the country.
Thank you, Ghayadah. And we've got 5 minutes to go, and I'm mainly going to, as one of the pleasures of being a moderator, I get to indulge the things that I'm super interested in. And one of the questions that I'd like Massimo to pick up, and we mentioned it earlier, is, and I knew I would find time because I was going to make time for it, is how do you see orbital data centers and doing optical off satellite sort of mass constellation processing, and what does that mean for us as an industry and user group? And does it mean then that the way that you purchase data, the way that you can run models over it, the way that it can capture it, and the insight you can get, rather than it being a task to a specific point, you can just have it on all the time? Those type of sort of nirvana concepts that we talked about previously. Massimo, I'm really interested in your take on that. So over to you.
Yeah, I will try to be quick. As you were mentioning, we've been talking about this since decades, but now we actually have 4 satellites in orbit with this capability, but many others are coming. Also, Planet with this new constellation has already demonstrated to be able to analyze data directly on board of its own satellites. So that's as I was anticipating, that's a way to reduce the time to information. Of course, there is also a change of paradigm because if we accept to get analytics from satellites very quickly, speaking about minutes from the collection, I must also accept not to get images anymore. And so I will probably be forced to trust the AI algorithms on board. And Sean was mentioning which are the risk of fully trusting AI instead of having a human control in the middle. So there's plenty of issues to discuss, and I don't believe we have time to do this today. But to answer your question, of course. Owning sovereign assets is another level entirely when you talk about access to data, because sovereignty is not just only about data access. It's about priority tasking, operational independence, protected information flows, mission customization, and in general, national control of the intelligence cycle. So this is where our group strategy becomes relevant, because we cross the entire value chain, from orbital infrastructure to onboard computing to Earth observation, exploitation, AI analytics, secure dissemination, supporting decision at the operational level. So in other words, we can help countries not only to consume Earth observation services, but progressively build sovereign end-to-end capabilities. And I think this is one of the most important transition happening today in the space sector, moving from buying images to building resilient and sovereign intelligence infrastructure.
Brilliant. And I think, Massimo, that's a sort of a great way to sort of wind up the session. I always think when you say you're happy to moderate these things, what are we going to talk about for 45 minutes? And I think we probably could have talked for 4 or 5 days, especially with such a knowledgeable set of panelists that are working both deeply within the Earth observation industry, but also across GCC. So I'd just like to take the last 10 seconds or so to thank Venkat, Massimo, Ghayadah, and Sean for your very precious time. Hopefully it's been useful for the questions that have come in and to everyone joining, and at least the lot, Alex, for actually organising and pulling us all together. So thank you very much for everyone's time. Super interesting. I think the future for Earth observation in GCC is certainly a very exciting one. So thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, dear speakers.